A very warm good afternoon to one and all present here. We are thankful to all of you for being with us for the first two sessions. And as our national webinar is moving towards its finale, now I am here, Dr. Anu Paul, hosting the last and final session. And we have with us Dr. S. Susan Deborah, Professor, MES College, Goa. She'll be dealing with the topic Positions and Readings in Eco-Criticism. It's my privilege to introduce the resource person to you. Her primary interests include eco-criticism, gender writing, eco-media, and food studies. She has been associated with Madras Christian College, Central University of Tamil Nadu, Rishi Valley School, and she has been collaborating with a lot of people in her research area. She has been awarded ASLE USA grant of $1,000 for creating an interactive video space in Chennai Eco-Film Festival of 2015 and to publish a book on eco documentaries which came out in 2014. And to just give you all a glimpse of her wide research, I would like to present some of her very famous titles. Her one publication which came out in Cambridge Scholars Publishing, Culture and Media, Eco-Critical Explorations. Eco-Documentaries, which is a collection of critical essays, which came out in 2016. And she collaborated with Archaeologics in that book called Critical Essays. A formidable presence on screen, a conversation with Salma Monani on Eco Cinema. She has done it in 2021. So it is my pleasure, ma'am, to invite you amongst us for today's session. Once again, I invite you to present your topic, Positions and Readings in Eco-Criticism. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for that introduction. It's always a pleasure to be talking on eco-criticism. I thank the organizers for having invited me, and I hope this talk provokes some of you to get interested in your position as part of the ecosystem. So today my paper focuses on the basic positions and readings in eco-criticism. So it will be a fairly simple paper. So in the humanities, students and sometimes colleagues always wonder, why should I study ecology and environment? They belong to the sciences. Now, in this day and time, all of you are talking about a virus, a small virus that is making the entire world dance to its tune. If this isn't science, then what it is? So many of us are discussing the terms career, symptomatic, asymptomatic, community transmission, even if you belong to the humanities. This is what eco-criticism is. Talking and engaging with the various social and cultural conditions that are accosting this planet and how we are also part of the same. Now take your poems, for example, starting with the romantics down to the postmodern times. Every text has some direct or indirect reference to the world around us, either through the description of trees, mountains, and clouds, or the lack of it. When nature, environment is seen beyond a background and setting, and it is viewed as an important aspect of action, then we are actively engaging with the same. So, to this effect, many concepts and theories are part of this broad term called eco-criticism. So we have deep ecology, a theory by a Norwegian philosopher, Arne, whose theory contests development, which becomes an important word in the present day scenario and in a post-liberal India. So when we see swanky airports and roads which are cutting across forests, it is development. And this has to do a lot with the ecological health of our country. The big projects such as the dams, highways, industries, which are supposed to bring prospects of higher economy, they are but a few examples. But what are we to do with these is a worthwhile question to ask. Now, many of us ask that question. All these things are happening, we can't do anything about it. Now, since you are sharing your living space with numerous other organisms, if they are at stake, so are you. If habitats are destroyed and ecosystems are wiped out, you and your family, which thinks it is safe, in reality isn't. Today's scenario is a best example of that. The virus living probably in a bat is now a threat to every human on this planet. So, what's the connection? If you see the first law of ecology, it states that everything is connected to everything else. The past generations believed in the concept that small is beautiful, everything was small scale, everything was self sufficient, a house was attached to a farm, animals, and everything was sourced from the same place. But today, every product has a different manufacturing zone. Now, here is a theory popularly known as eco-criticism, environmental humanities, which connects literature to the physical world around us and creates awareness about these issues that need awareness. So it is not just for the sciences to be aware of all these things. I think the entire humanity has to be aware of all these things that are happening around it. So, will we solve the world's problems by knowing all these? Could you stop the virus from spreading if you take proper precaution? Maybe yes, and maybe no. But you might be a bit more aware of what you are doing. For example, now you are wary of touching any surface. You would practice more hygiene, and probably you're taking care of your actions so that you don't get positive. So, awareness and action is what the world needs today. And it is impossible to live without taking time to understand the physical world around us and on us. I say on us because our body is a house to millions and millions of bacteria which are not visible to us. So, if you see, ecological consciousness in formal writing and activism began around the 60s. And that time there was a pressing need which was seen for environmental conservation and awareness. So every issue that affected the environment gave rise to specific critical theories that argued for a deeper understanding of the problems and systems which cause the same. So in this session, I propose to come up with certain positions that define the environmental thought from the contemporary point of view. So my talk is divided into two parts. First, I would talk of the formative and changing definitions of eco-criticism. And second, I would try to talk about the different waves of eco-criticism, where eco-critics chose specific positions to dwell and discourse. So here I would also connect theory and the practical application of the theory to the text by citing a few examples. So first, let us look at how eco-criticism began. Eco-criticism, if you see, is a mid to late 20th century theory. It embraced a lot of theories, concepts, perspectives, and positions. Some eco-critics trace the history of environmental writing to the work of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which was published in 1962. So Greg Garrard, a very famous eco-critic who is now teaching in British Columbia, Canada, says in his book Eco-Criticism, which is a very popularly anthologized book, and everywhere people who do eco-criticism start with this book and perhaps Cheryl Gottfelty's Reader. So he says in the first chapter that Rachel Carson's A Fable for Tomorrow is the beginning of modern environmentalism. Silent Spring has also bearings in other positions and interpretations in eco-criticism. Now, the term eco-criticism itself was formally introduced by William Ruckert in his 1978 essay, Literature and Ecology, an Experiment in Eco-Criticism. So, in this essay, Ruckert defines eco-criticism as the application of ecology and ecological concepts to the study of literature, because ecology has the greatest relevance to the present and future of the world. So, while the definition focuses on the possible relations between literature and nature, by applying ecological concepts, it also finds a common ground between human and the non human to show how they can coexist in various ways because environmental issues have become an integral part of our existence. Now, this is the basic way of doing eco criticism. I think many institutions try doing this, taking an ecological concept and using them to read literature. Cheryl Blotfelty's anthology, The Eco-Criticism Reader, Landmarks in Literary Ecology, which was published in 1996, is the first ever book published in the area of eco-criticism. The influence of the eco-criticism reader was so much that everyone started reading about eco-criticism, and the concept started gaining popularity and wide readership as well as scholarship. In her introduction to the Eco-Criticism Reader, Glotfelty claims that by studying the relationship between literature and the physical environment, one is actively engaging in being a part of the solution for the global environmental crisis. Glotfelty lays down the foundation of eco-criticism in two basic principles. Eco-criticism should fight against anthropocentrism, where man is at the center of everything. When I say man, it is man and woman, both of them, and probably other genders as well. And it should embrace the principles and narratives that integrate humans, their culture, and ecology. Lawrence Buell, another influential eco-critic in The Future of Environmental Criticism, Environmental Crisis, and Literary Imagination, proposes that there are two waves in eco-criticism, and Scott Slovic and Johnny Adamson propose the third and fourth waves. So now what I will be doing is I will be discussing the various waves in eco-criticism, which starts from the time eco-criticism started gaining wide popularity till the present, and how different concepts and theories, everything come under this branch called eco-criticism or environmental humanities. So now in the first wave in eco-criticism, eco-critics call for a greater scientific literacy. They look to science as a correlative to critical subjectivism and cultural relativism. So they oppose cultural theories, anthropocentric arrogance, and they try to say that, look, so far we have only been looking at man and how man is at the center of everything, and how humans should be not seen as just the center, but they should be seen as a part of the entire system. So the first wave eco-critics understand eco-criticism as synchronous with the aims of earth care. So eco-critics in the first wave, they would redefine culture as organicist with a view to envisioning a philosophy of organism that would redefine the hierarchy between humans and nature, because humans are always seen at the center of everything and not as part of the web of life. So this idea that nature is organic and culture is man-made, there was a strong dualism seen in the first wave. So nature is seen something that is outside of culture, something that has to be taken care of and preserved. Uh, I think it's very common to hear people saying, "I like to spend time with nature. I like to go out there and see nature." I mean, you like going to the beach, you say, "Okay, I like to be with nature, so I'm going to the beach," not realizing that you are as much as part of nature as much as the beach is. So when you say that the beach away there is nature and you are something else, there is a dualism seen. And the concept of deep ecology was which was a radical environmental concept by movement by RNAs. It stresses on the intrinsic value of every living being, irrespective of the utility value, is important. And also ecofeminism, which connects the oppression of women to the domination of nature, could be seen as part of the first wave eco-criticism. Now, ecofeminism since then has come a long way. There are theorists who are working on various aspects of feminism and ecology, and ecofeminism, a very basic way of looking at the connection between the oppression of women and the domination of nature, belong to the first wave. So now, the first wave, I thought I would explain the first wave of eco-criticism by reading a poem. I just I was reading these poems, which was written during the time of COVID, and so I just one poem which struck me was "What If It Is Just Nature" by somebody called Julie Sheldon. So it's a long poem, but I think if I read just about three stanzas of the poem, you would get a gist of it. I would probably read three stanzas and then go to the last stanza. So it starts like this: What if it's just nature taking back control, questioning the actions of every living soul? What if it's just nature asking us to stop, to think about our planet and treasure what we've got? What if it's just nature slowing us right down, time to look around us and see what can be found? Now I'm going to last stanza because she talks about various aspects. What if it's just nature setting us a test to try to save our planet? Let's do our very best. So this poetess, what she tries to do is she tries to look at this whole pandemic as something that is devised by nature, sending us a message of trying to give more importance to nature. So, if you see this, the poet shows a very romantic approach to nature, and it somehow presents nature as something which is pristine, sublime, and picturesque. And humans are not trying to look at all that, and we are on our way to destruction. So the speaker we see is very clearly fascinated by the idea that virus is nature's way of trying to save the planet from the humans' various ways, which are causing immense destruction to the planet. I mean, across the border, everywhere, across the board. I mean, whether it's India or whether it's the US or any country, if you take, I think everywhere we can point out to some form of destruction in the name of economic development. Either some dam has to be built, or some airports have to be built, or probably some railway lines have to be laid. So here we see that the speaker is clearly dividing nature and culture. So the first wave of eco-criticism, if you see, shows a clear demarcation between nature and culture, where nature is seen as something which should be preserved by humans. So evidently there is a dualism where human is not seen as part of the nature, and there's a sense of othering. I hope you get to see this, and you can observe this even in, if you take the example of Robert Frost stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Even there, we can show this. I mean, for that matter, you can take any work of art, any text, and read it eco-critically. It's not that there should be some amount of nature in it, even if even the lack of nature could be interpreted in an eco-critical way. So this is the first wave of eco-criticism, and I showed you how there is a strong dualism seen. But one thing you should be aware is these waves which I am discussing in this paper cannot be very strictly demarcated. There might have been some theorists in the first wave who don't also talk about nature and culture as separate entities. So now let's move on to the second wave in eco-criticism. So Ursula Heights, among other second wave eco-critics, argue for a scientifically informed foregrounding of green issues in literature, but they do not consider science as an authoritative model. Now, it means that people in the humanities should be interested in the nuances and the details of green issues in literature, that we should be aware and we should probably try and engage with them, because science cannot be taken as the ultimate model of giving us information. Humanities also has to be there so that there is a wholesome approach to the entire issue. So, in her very popular book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Eco-Criticism, Ursula Heiss mentions that discourses of science and literature must be read both with and against each other. So, eco-critics belonging to this wave question the organicist models of the environment. They believe that nature and constructed environments are all mixed up. If you see in the first wave, there's a definite demarcation. There is nature on the other side, and there is culture on this side, and there was no way of merging. But in the second wave, they don't agree to that. They see that everything is like a jumbled mess, everything is mixed up. You cannot separate nature from culture. Now, if a bird, let's say a crow takes some plastic which is there on the road and tries to build its nest, can you call that nature or culture? Because it is taking things from culture and that is nature. So, now how is plastic, which becomes the material in the crow's nest, uh, can you separate it saying, okay, this is culture and the woods and the branches which is there, that is nature? So it is like that. It's all together. It's in a jumble mess. It's mixed up. So nature, the second wave critics do not see nature as something pristine and sublime entity which is out there. So they saw environment in a very skeptical view, and they tried to question the pristineness that is associated with it. The need for a social perspective in eco-criticism is highlighted in the second wave. Joni Adamson's Environmental Justice and Juan Martinez alias Environmentalism of the Poor, they all speak about this. They talk about the need for a social perspective, not the romantic's view of nature is beautiful and it's out there, it's pure in its form, and we are spoiling it. Industrial revolution is completely degrading it, and we should preserve it. So this wave takes a slightly radical view than the first wave. So Nick de Mott, he talks in his theory, which is a reverse of deep ecology. He says social ecologists suggest we must first address our social inequalities before remedying the environment. So ultimately, what this wave tries to say is the social issues around you are also as much as part of the environment, and somehow they are connected to the environment. So, according to Marlin, a first wave of eco criticism was filled with deep ecologists, while the second wave concentrated on social concerns. So, environmental justice is one such concept. And this theory links social issues to the socio-cultural justice movement, which means that your socio-cultural environment is very important when you are discussing environmental issues. So now David Scalzberg, he's a political theorist, in his very seminal paper, Defining Environmental Justice, Theories, Movements, and Nature, examines environmental justice on the basis of few questions like what is meant by justice in environmental justice? What do activists and movements mean when one employs the term? How different is environmental justice from ecological justice? And Scalzberg agrees with the concept of justice as a democratic distribution of goods in a society. So there's a slight Marxist turn here. So, any form of unequal distribution is an injustice. The neoliberal policies of the government and economic development, which systematically destroys forest covers, displaces communities, and depletes natural resources, could be read from the lens of an environmental ecological justice. Now, what I would do is I would take the same poem which I read earlier for the first wave, and I would like to show you how the second wave of eco-criticism is interpreted according to the theorists here. So the second wave, as we mentioned earlier, it broke down the concepts of nature-culture divide and blurred the boundaries of these two entities. So in this poem, what if it's just nature? It wouldn't see nature as something that is away, that is separate, as the other. So this wave questions the organicity of nature. And in the first wave, the demarcation is seen, whereas in this wave, nature is not something separate. So the sense of awe in looking at a landscape and the romantic way of saying maybe nature is doing this to heal itself is not something that the eco critics in this wave would agree to. They would be they would actually challenge that particular view. So you see how eco-criticism can be interpreted as as it evolves. It's quite dynamic in that matter. It is not something which is static, and you cannot say this is eco-criticism. Using ecological concepts to study literature, no, it keeps evolving based on the needs of the particular context and the present time conditions. So that is what eco-criticism does, and that is why it becomes a very pertinent theory for every humanities student to be engaging in. So now, while the first and second wave eco-criticism focused on the Western literary ecology, the third wave of eco-criticism included many cultural communities around the world. So that is the speciality of the third wave eco-criticism. So here, I think I have to mention the work which is done by Association of Studies in Literature and Environment, US, that is ASLE US. So they have brought together diverse eco-criticisms from across the world. So ASLE US works for the promotion of eco-criticism around the globe. So they have an interdisciplinary journal, ILE, which is Interdisciplinary Studies in the Literature and Environment, and it invites essays from scholars working in different disciplines to contribute on ecological and environmental issues and concerns. So Astley US has several affiliates. It has in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong, India, and many other countries to promote local eco-criticisms and contribute to the growing body of eco-literature. So in this way, you see that how eco-criticism becomes more wider, it becomes more inclusive, it starts identifying a lot of other peculiar issues to certain continents and certain countries, because I think every place has its own version of environmental problems and issues, much like the feminism, which had different waves, and how each wave contributed differently to the whole body of feminism. Eco criticism is no different. So the Indian affiliate of ASLE is something called Tinai. Now, Tinai is an Indian ecosophy which integrates nature, culture, and the sacred. It is similar to the Greek concept of oikos, which means the household or family. So, Tinai is named after the Tamil concept. It had its origins in Madras Christian College, Chennai, when Professor Nirmal Selvamani offered a course in Tamil poetics in the 80s. And this later became eco literature in the 90s. So, Professor Selvamani could be hailed as the founding father of eco criticism in India. So, from then on, Tinai has been actively conducting conferences, workshops, and it also has a sub organ called the Tinai Eco Film Festival, which is a platform to screen and watch films with ecological environmental content. So, TEF organizes film festivals and conferences biannually. So this is the evolving of the third wave eco. Now let's move on to the next one. So the third wave in eco criticism, as I already mentioned, is very vibrant. So what happened is the canon started including international eco-criticism. First, if you see in the first wave and the second wave, it was mostly Western, probably Eurocentric and more American. But in this wave, it started including texts and issues from countries around the world. So Patrick Murphy, in his book Farther Afield in the Study of Nature Oriented Literature, calls for the presentation of national literatures in an internationally relative and comparative framework. So, some evident characteristics of this third wave are the theorization of eco cosmopolitanism as translocal and neo bioregionalist, which specified on the specific places, and it attaches to specific but complex locales exploration of material ecofeminism, ecofeminities, eco-masculinities, and rigorous attention to animality. So Richard Twine, Paul Poulet, and Greta Gard are some of the eco-critics who have been working in the area of eco-masculinities. Now, as eco-criticism is growing, a lot of different positions are being clubbed uh, under the tree of eco criticism or environmental humanities. In many colleges, this course is offered as environmental humanities, and some of them still go by the old school eco criticism. So Ursula Hayes, again, quoting Robert Hass in A Sense of Place and A Sense of Planet, writes, basis for genuine ecological understanding lies in the local, that is, your own region. Knowledge of the local place and its ecology makes the individual ethically responsible. towards the earth and its ecology. But it should also be taken into account that Hayes is talking from a largely Western perspective. And applying this to our cultures, we need our own concepts and a slightly different kind of approach. But in spite of Hayes discussing place and knowledge of the local, she also talks about world environmental citizenship, which includes both the local and the global perspectives. So the third wave eco-criticism also extended to include animal studies. Now, animal studies was maybe a small part of cultural studies, and it was an interdisciplinary subject. I mean, which was not finding uh, probably a strong position anywhere. But when eco-criticism includes animal studies, now animal studies becomes important because it brings together various disciplines, and it also re-examines traditional ethical, political, and epistemological categories in the context of renewed attention to and respect for animal life. Looking peculiarly anthrozoology, all these things started gaining a lot of currency during this particular third wave of eco-criticism. So if we see the animal studies, it's actually a very novel approach to reading diverse genres where animals feature extensively. The basis of animal studies is Derrida's seminal essay, The Animal That, Therefore I Am. So, in this essay, Derrida challenges the human and non human binary and deconstructs, in his usual style, the various attributes that humans have given to animals. So, to explain this better, this animal study turn in eco criticism, I have chosen the poem Snake by D.H. Lawrence. It's a popularly anthologized poem. I think many of you would have read The Snake either when you were a student or probably when you are even teaching it. And if you interpret the same snake according to the first wave in eco criticism, the focus would have been on the self realization of the speaker and how he develops a non anthropocentric relationship with the snake. So, the speaker's knowledge about the world outside is based on culture and education, which molds his attitudes, perspectives, and approach towards everything. But what happens after the realization? Does he stop with that realization? First wave eco criticism stops with the realization that he kind of finds there is a common ground. So now let us see a few lines. The voice of my education said to me, he must be killed. For in Cecily, the black snakes are innocent. The gold are venomous. And voices in me said, if you were a man, you would take a stick and break him now and finish him off. So we see that the voices of education and most common sense makes him think that he should kill that snake because otherwise he might harm him. So the speaker's cultural conditioning over there makes him pick a log and throw at the snake. I looked around, I put down my pitcher, I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water trough with a clatter. So now, after he does this, he is having an ecological self realization when he says, and immediately I regretted it. I thought how paltry, how vulgar. What a mean act. I despised myself and the voices of my accursed human education. Now, once he realizes the ecological self realization comes into him, he is actually cursing the human education which has conditioned him into a particular ideology that a snake is evil, it's going to harm you, so you have to protect yourself. So here we see that the man is given a lot of importance and the snake is seen as something which has to be killed. So now animal studies will go beyond to say that the human is seen as another animal, thereby cancelling the hierarchical and binary nature of human and animal. Now, sometimes religion also plays an important role in this. when certain animals are seen in a certain way in religion, we are already conditioned to think that animal is evil, or that animal is bad, because the religion thinks that that animal is bad. So this is a kind of a cultural and a religious conditioning that we are born into. It's more to do with an ideology that we are born into. Now eco-criticism tries to challenge that very ideology, because as long as you think you are at the center of everything, I don't think you will be able to understand and uh, engage with eco-criticism. But eco-criticism is very good if, as long as you're standing in the first wave. Nature is out there and you are out here. So this realization that the reptile animal has given the human animal vital lessons by domesticating the speaker, by making him deny all that he has acquired through his culture and education. And I thought of the albatross, and I wished he would come back, my snake. For he seemed to me like a king in exile, uncrowned in the underworld, now due to be crowned again. And so, I missed my chance with one of the lords of life, and I have something to expiate, a pettiness. So, I showed you how this poem could be interpreted from different perspectives, and in different way how the human is placed along with the non-human. Now let us move on to the fourth wave of eco-criticism. So though the waves are, I told you in the beginning that all the waves are share a very hazy boundary. So if you see, the fourth wave is very much in spirit like the third wave, but there are a few more additions in this particular period. Uh, what happens in this fourth wave are multiculturalism, which already started in the third wave, gains more currency here, and prominent voices of the multicultural experiences are taken into account. Then applied eco-criticism, which is application of eco-critical framework to various disciplines like food studies, climate change narratives, animal studies, and all these things are slowly becoming quite popular. Now, if all these three waves focused on a thematic rationale, the fourth wave tries to introduce a different rationale, that is a structural difference. Rather than a qualitative eco-critical approach, Alexa Wake Mosner and Matthew Schneider Meyerson, they propose a quantitative one, which is very much closer to the social sciences research, which they call empirical eco-criticism. So, a workshop on this was conducted by the Rachel Carson Center, which again works for environmental humanities. It's based in Munich. So, there was this workshop in December 2018, which kind of set a formal platform for this kind of an eco criticism, which is more like the social sciences approach and trying to gain empirical results rather than qualitative results, which the humanities often tries to engage in. So this wave also includes the works of eco-critics such as Stacey Alimo, who discuss the interconnections, interchanges, and transits between human bodies and non-human natures. So in her book Bodily Nature, Stacey Alimo views the human corporeality as trans-corporeality, in which the human is always intermeshed with the more than human world. So the human is again inseparable from the environment. So in the second wave also we saw a similar thought, but this is a little more complex, because here even your gadgets, your your interaction in the online world, everything is connected, everything is enmeshed. So the boundaries are dissolved and every organism is enmeshed in the physical world. So Alimo says transcorporeality contests the master subject of Western humanist individualism, who imagines himself as transcendent, disembodied, and removed from the world he surveys. The transcorporeal subject is generated through and entangled with biological, technological, economic, social, political, and other systems, processes, and events at vastly different scales. It does not contemplate discrete objects from a safe distance, but instead things as the very stuff of the ever emergent world. So, in a way, we are all together, we are all enmeshed with all the different things that are part of our lives. So, if we take the same poem, Snake, and interpret it using the third wave's position, we could say that the speaker has become the snake after the encounter he has had with the snake. Because he says, and he wished, and I wished he could come back, my snake. So in the beginning of the poem, he starts with a snake came to my water trough. That a snake becomes my snake. Now you see how the change happens from a position of hierarchy where the man sees himself to be at the center. So he slowly realizes that he becomes the snake, and that he and the snake share the same region and the locale, and the snake is as much as native to that place as he is. So today, when we are building houses and we see a lot of snakes and a lot of plants, we want to somehow take them off, remove them from the place so that we have a clean, sanitized compound. And similarly, a lot of lakes which have been dried up, I used to build a lot of buildings. So when automatically there are floods, the water finds its way there, and probably up to the first floor of the building is submerged because we have encroached upon the space of some other organism. We have encroached upon the space of the river. Why we do that? Because we think we just have the power to do it, and we have to house the growing population. So this is how we could do. But there are other ways of doing it in a very sustainable fashion, which is often a long route, which is not feasible, or nobody has the patience, I should say. So the ability of the speaker to become the snake is transcorporeality, but there is no difference or boundary between the human animal and the non-human animal. So now a pertinent emotion that pervades the mind. When we talk of snake, automatically we talk about the snake, and there is always a talk of fear. Now, fear of the unknown and the elements could be is something which the human mind, if it cannot explain anything, uh, it gets scared of it. There is fear. So now that is what is happening to us. This virus, it's so scary because we are not able to see the virus. We don't know how things happen, right? Just give me. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible? Can just someone give me a heads up whether I'm audible?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
you're audible, ma'am. We can hear you. But if you could
Thank
just
you.
switch off the fan, the disturbance in the background will be over. Fan.
Okay, I'll just try doing that. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I just had to because sometimes I tend to talk, and what happens is I suddenly get logged off. So I always try to ask in the middle whether I'm audible. I think this has become the common.
Yes, ma'am, you're very well audible. I think you can continue.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
So now the existing condition of the virus is an example of this fear. So this affect of fear is theorized by Simon Stock in his 2018 volume, The Ecophobia Hypothesis. So one of the dangerous phobias of the present era is ecophobia, and it causes dangerous adverse effects to humans as well as nature. In his book, The Ecophobia Hypothesis, Simon C. Stock acknowledges that the ecophobic condition is surrounded with fear, contempt, indifference, or lack of mindfulness towards the natural environment. He asserts that fear exists on a spectrum. So ecophobia remains between the points where rational fears becomes irrational fear. He asserts that like any other human behavior, ecophobia is in our genes. That is why when somebody sees a snake, the first instinct is to kill the snake. So, by understanding biophilia, which is a concept which is put forth by E.O. Wilson, Simon Estock writes that biophilia fails to understand it on a spectrum, and both biophilia and ecophobia stand at the opposite sides of the spectrum. So, he claims that if biophilia subconsciously connects with nature, there is an inclination to disconnect from nature as well. So he says ecophobia is another point on the spectrum of our ethical relationship with the natural world. He asserts that ecophobia is not a happy topic and it's not utopic. Ecophobia is all about frustrated agency. So Michael Fisher observes that indigenous people have a very rational fear towards nature. They attach intrinsic specific value to specific subjects and objects in nature. So he claims that the relationship the indigenous people possess with the environment is more moralistic and spiritual. See, the people in the tribal communities also have a fear, but that fear is more of a reverence. So, from an indigenous perspective, there is no genetic, no inherent, no inevitable need to fear and hate nature. So uh, this, this conceptualization of Fisher's indigenous fear can be rationalized, whereas the Estock's idea of fear cannot through towards nature. So I would give one example of how we can apply ecophobia. So this is about an article which is titled Homing Ecophobia, a study of a YouTube clip on tsunami, which was written by Researc Alex. So in this essay, he examines ecophobia in a YouTube clip on tsunami in Tamil Nadu and the responses to the clip by student audiences. So, in analyzing ecophobia, he argues that there are two conflicting spaces, open and closed. That is the sea and the stage where the videographer positions himself. So, he observes that the videographer experiences ecophobia because of two reasons. One, it is the unfamiliarity of the place, and the other is an uncontrolled situation, as in the tsunami. So now ecophobia is gaining a lot of currency because it is a very recent trend, and the book has just come out in towards the end of 2018. So now, if you see all these different conceptual frameworks, and if you see them critically and try and analyzing them, we can conclude that there is no one common principle by which eco-criticism is defined. So, eco-criticism and theories and various theories are formed by basing them on the specific context and the particular issues. This is where different eco-criticisms are there is nothing fixed. It's that's why, as I told you in the beginning of the talk, it's very dynamic and it keeps evolving. And through this, we would be able to understand environmental humanities and connect ourselves to the larger picture that is the nature cultures surrounding us. So, with this, I think I have made some positions and readings in eco criticism clear to you. So, with that, I conclude today's talk. I thank you very much for having me here, and I hope I have not confounded you.
Thank you, ma'am. It has been a pleasure hosting you. We have a few questions in the chat box. Can I read it out for you,
Yes,
ma'am?
please. Yeah.
So, Here is the question. The question is put forward by Rosmi Alex.
Yeah.
Ma'am, what is your take on material eco-criticism that attributes to the agency of matter?
Material eco-criticism is a very upcoming field in eco-criticism. As I told you, I think in the third wave this has become popular. I think a book also has come out titled Material Eco-Criticism, because material eco-criticism is very specific. It is culture specific. It is locale specific. And that is why the agency of matter plays a very vital role in eco-criticism itself, because eco-criticism considers all these things as part of the nature cultures, and it is very important that one engages with the material aspects or around us. I think anything can be read from this perspective, so I would suggest you read that book if you are interested to further pursue your interest in that particular area. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope Rosmi's doubts are cleared. So that was the one question now we got from the audience. And it's indeed my pleasure to have listened to you, ma'am, this evening. And you have been very clear about your viewpoints in this presentation. You have stressed the importance of awareness and action, and that is what the world needs today. And the audience would have definitely benefited listening to your take on the ecophobia, what is ecophobia, and how you put forward the examples from tsunami, which literally instilled fears in all of us. And again, presently also we are in phase of a pandemic, which again instills fear in us. And the three waves of eco-criticism made the background clear for the people who are listening about how this new genre evolved in the arena. So thank you, ma'am. And I
Thank you
hope
very much. Yeah.
the audience who were listening to us were with us uh, today from the morning 9:30 session, first two sessions, including the last session. Thank you for your valuable presence. I hope this three sessions have been beneficial to all of you. And it's indeed my pleasure to quote Lord Byron. When we talk about nature, a few lines of poetry is always needed, I feel. So there is pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes. By the deep sea and music in its roar. I love not man the less, but nature more. So, on that note from Byron's Child Harold's Pilgrimage, I would like to conclude our national webinar, Literature in the Times of Coronavirus and Ecological Perspective. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank the three resource persons who are with us today. And also, it's my pleasure to thank our college for giving us the opportunity to host such an event. I also thank IQAC for being there to conduct such knowledgeable events. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you everyone for being there.
Thank you very
Once
much.
again,
Yeah.